97% of founders fail to raise capital. If you don't want to be one of them, keep watching. You may think fundraising is just about having a great idea and a polished pitch deck. You got to think again. This mindset keeps founders stuck. Cold emailing hundreds of investors, spamming LinkedIn, and submitting pitch decks to investor websites with zero responses is not the way you fundraise. Even if you do land a meeting, you struggle to make investors actually want to invest because you're not speaking their language, you lack clarity, and you haven't built the right momentum in what you're doing. Then, you don't actually know the step-by-step process of what it actually takes to be successful. Sound familiar? Because that's how 97% of founders fail to raise capital. But the 3% who succeed, they follow a different approach. A proven 5-step process that gives them the clarity, confidence, and strategy to close investors the right way. Now, for most founders, this is something that they do multiple times after failed fundraisers like myself. But there is a proven process of what you can do. And for example, this month, I helped 2 founders raise $7.65 million in total. Happy to show you them in a DM. I just don't want to put them onto YouTube or in a video. But if you want to send me a DM, I'm happy to give you the case studies, including videos of them talking about it. And look, we didn't just pitch investors. We didn't just haphazardly try and investors in such a bad way. We executed a proven process, a method that takes you from just another startup in an investor's inbox to a deal they actually want to close. Here's exactly how we did it, and more importantly, how you can too. So look, most founders struggle to raise capital because they think fundraising is just about having a great idea and investors will come running. But that's not how it works. Fundraising is about how prepared you are, how strong your narrative is, and how strategically you run your round. And if you get these things right, building the right network to get you to 100 plus warm connections, mastering conversion through an investable narrative, using an investor psychology driven process, that's what creates a perception of you being a great founder, and your chances of closing skyrocket. So let's break it down. How do we actually do this? So the first step is understanding why investors make decisions, because this dictates the tactics you use, the way you approach fundraising, and what truly moves the needle in getting funded. Because look, investors don't just look for numbers. That's not enough evidence and data in the world for that to happen. So how do they evaluate you? They look for emotional cues of if they believe you are going to succeed, right? Things like how you tell your story, whether you fit into their vision of a founder, but most importantly, how they perceive you as a founder, right? And you have to understand what that perception feels like, because that decides the tactics that you make for everything else that we're going to talk about. And to succeed, you have to position yourself in an unstoppable force, and you have to make sure that you are increasing that perception as much as possible. And an aspect of someone that they can actually trust as well. Without this foundational layer, then you'll have zero clue on what actually moves the needle for you. And once you understand how investors think and make decisions, coming from my experience on sitting on both sides of the table as a VC-backed founder, but also a VC myself, you'll completely change the way in which you think about fundraising. So you need to make sure that you're increasing that perception, and you need to focus on the things that actually move the needle. So what is the 20% of work that gives you 80% of the success, right? Because it's not your pitch deck. It's not cold emailing investors. There's so much more that you have to do if you want to be successful in your funding round. So what's number 2? Number 2 is about building out a network that actually works. Look, there's a reason why people say warm connections reign supreme. And that's because it's true. It's one of the biggest precursors to a successful round. Because if you don't meet any investors, then you'll never get investment, right? Look, my first company, I completely failed to fundraise. I had to shut down the company because I didn't meet a single investor. So without doing anything else, you need to make sure you're meeting as many investors as possible. How do we do that? What does that look like? You need to create the perception that you're a great founder, surrounded by a great network, and that everyone around the investor is talking about you. It's not enough to just get into meetings. It's about the momentum and perception you create before and as you go through your fundraising round. And here's how we make it happen through what I call the build framework. And this is a framework that allows you to network strategically in the right way to make sure that you can get as many warm connections and you can build a network that investors love that's going to be able to get you 100 plus warm connections. So what is that? What is the build framework? So as you can see, it goes through this. But the first thing is we need to actually build a base, right? We need to set up the foundation of what CRM you're actually going to use. So for example, I have a CRM that a lot of founders have used. We've raised nearly $100 million on that framework alone, on that CRM alone, that you can, if you do work with me, you can use instantly. But I don't believe that's necessarily always the right answer. The best CRM is the one that you're actually going to use. So we need to make sure that you're actually focusing on building a CRM that actually works, whether it's on a Google Sheets, whether it's on HubSpot, whatever it is, focusing on building that CRM with your preferred CRM and honing into exactly what we need to be tracking. So things like connector list, investor list, what does a back channel look like, building a Kanban board for pitch tracking, all of these kind of, network lists, mapping out all of these kind of things so that we have a CRM connected and we know exactly when you need to put things and we're gathering the right information at the right time that's going to make us super organized in our CRM and our network. The foundational aspect, you can't miss this. We have to focus on it. Now, what's the second one? The second one is unlock, right? Which is building network trees and connectors. If you want to actually build a network that loves you and tells all the investors how great you are, and you build the perception that you need to actually start speaking to people. So we go through how do you actually do that in the right way, building out the first initial connector list, and then focusing what I call network trees. For example, you're going to meet one person, they're going to introduce you to 3 people, and then those people are going to introduce you to 3 people too. And you can slowly build out your network through this. But it's being structured in how you do this in the right way and what you need to say and do to make sure that everyone's excited by what you're doing here, right? Because you can go from one person, right, to 20, just from one introduction, one connection. So we need to build out network trees and understand what they are, and then have the framework in place so that when you are building your network, you know the right things to say, you know the right things to do as you're going through it, okay? So number 3 is identify. We need to find the right investors for you and really focusing around building out that list of 150 investors that are perfect for you, that make the most sense, that are actually going to invest into you and make the sense for your stage, your process, how much you're raising, all of these kind of stuff. So you're not wasting time on investors that are just going to reject you before you do anything else, okay? The one is leverage, right? We need to leverage how we're actually doing outreach, how we're doing engagement. And we'll go through that in a second through the process section and step 5. But we need to focus around what does it actually look like to engage this network? How do we make sure that they're keeping them warm? How are we doing the outreach when we get to it? So you can get to 100 plus warm connections. You can make everyone always talking about you, saying how amazing you are as a founder, and that all of this buzz around you and perception that you are the best founder in the last 6 months. And the whole network is saying that, and that you know everyone. How do we do this in the right way? We need to leverage that and we need to focus on it. And the last one is discipline. We need to systemize your network in the right way so that you can carry on doing these certain things over a long period of time, whether it's for this funding round or even your next one, so that you can keep building this out and build the network of your dreams that's going to get you the right connections. And look, this is not just going to help you with a funding round. This is going to help you with sales. It's going to help you with all these kind of things. So you need to focus on doing this in the right way. And if you can do that, and you can focus on building that right network and get enough meetings of the best investors who really believe in what you're doing, and there's a high perception that you're going to be the one that's going to be successful from everyone else they're talking to, and it's also help you as you go through the funding round with your network as well, then we give ourselves the highest chance of success to meet the right investors for us and the ones that are actually going to invest, okay? But look, getting a meeting is just the beginning. The real challenge is getting investors committed. And here's what you need to do. We need to go through what I call the narrative playbook of the 3 C's, okay? So the first one is clarity. We need to start really making it clear on what makes you exciting. We need to gather that information as much as possible coming from your brain, who's so ingrained in your business, and take it out as much as possible into a process that makes investors excited, that allows you to get the right information and make it super clear on what insights that you have that make you exciting and what information is going to be the reason why people make an investment. So that's the first one. The second one is we need to focus on the 5 stories, right? So what are the 5 stories? The 5 stories is really focusing around what the major stories you're going to be building as you go through your narrative. These 5 stories is basically the core of your information and clarity that you're going to be doing. So the first one is actually creating the deeper reasons for why you're building a business, and then from that, the founder origin story. We then need to build in unique insights. What insights do you actually have, and what stories do you have about them that makes it exciting? That's a reason that you're going to be able to, get investment. We then need to focus on, because of your backstory, because of the unique insights you have, how you actually started the business and why that's important. We then need to move into the vision story about really setting the vision of why an investor should be excited by you and why that matters. Because at that point, we'll actually have an aspect of an investor saying to themselves, okay, I love this founder, I love what they're doing, they have amazing unique insights, and I believe in their vision. If you can get to those points in the narrative, then we're in a really exciting part. And then the last thing we need to do is we need to start building in mini stories of actually how we're going to use that for the other 2 C's as we go through. Okay, so that's clarity. We need to focus on really making yourself clear and concise and getting the right information that actually matters in your narrative. Then we need to start building in conviction, right? No matter how great we do the clarity stuff and we make you more clear, that's not the way in which investors are going to be speaking to you, right? They're going to be jumping in a meeting with you and they're going to ask you questions, and we need to make sure that you are in the right way. So the first thing we need to do is we need to actually build out your investor Q&As. I'm not talking about a document that you're going to send to investors. That will be there and you'll be able to get it from it. But I'm talking specifically about how do we actually make sure that you are answering the questions in the right way. You aren't rambling on, you're adding the right data in how you're doing it. And you need to build this out. You need to have a table of every question you've ever been asked, how you answered it, and work and iterate and improve on how you do this. This is why everything interplays to each other, but why preparation is so important and practicing is so important, because you need to iterate and work on this and hone those questions that by the time an investor actually comes to you and says, hey, I want to learn more about your GTM or your go-to-market, or tell me a little bit more around your product, why it's better than competitors, or whatever it is, you know exactly how to say it. You're not going to ramble on, and you're going to be really specific and make investors love you. Now, on top of that, the second part of conviction is we need to start building in storytelling. We need to focus on how you're actually making the investors, or rather, answering investor questions in the best way. And that comes from storytelling, and it comes from really having a structured process of how you build stories into every answer that you do that makes investors feel connected to you. Because one thing you need to realize is investors, they aren't connected to your business as much as you are. So we need to make sure that we're building in the way in which we're building in answers, and we're building storytelling through it that makes them feel connected, that instantly makes them feel the way you do about your, the problem statement, or the way in which your customers feel, and makes them feel like they want to be a part of this process. Okay. And the last one, in terms of that narrative playbook, to really hone into building that investable narrative, and the biggest thing that I think founders miss, is control. We need to make sure that you're building a system in place of how you practice, and then focusing on record and review. Because no matter how much you do in clarity and conviction, no matter how much you focus on these 2 sections, if you don't build in a system of how you control your tone, your communication, how you answer questions in the right way, iterating in the right way, and record and review, no matter what happens, you're not going to be successful in your investment narrative. So we need to make sure we're doing all 3 steps and going through that 3-step process in the right way to make yourself successful. I've actually put number 4 as practice and iteration because it's a whole section in itself, really. All of this doesn't matter if you don't practice and refine your approach. You need to become a fundraising machine. And lucky enough, fundraising is a skill that allows you to do that. The best founders iterate and improve with each investor interaction. So what does that look like? Like, how do we do that in the right way? Okay. So the first thing we need to do is we need to have a positioning refinement system. No matter how much you think that you know what investors look for, and even I think what investors would want, we need to have a system in place of how you refine the positioning of your business. I'll use a great example. One of the founders that I helped raise in January, right? We raised 4.5 million euros. Again, if you want to comment, and I'll DM you or reply to me on LinkedIn, I'm happy to send you the case study. Daniel raised 4.5 million euros. It's very successful, building a robotics business. He wasn't able, right, to actually get the right narrative because he was positioning how he was talking about his business wrong. And the only way in which we could improve that was actually refining his positioning and iterating and working and having a system in place of how you do that in the right way so that we could make sure that his positioning, how he talks about his business, how he's building his business, what he's doing in his business model, what other things he needs to be working on and getting information on that's going to make investors want to invest. So super important to have that position refinement system in place. The second thing we need to focus on, which is the biggest needle mover, I would say, narrative, more than anything else that we do within this fundraising unlock program, is the fundraising communication lab. Because like I said before at the beginning, perception is everything. And you need to understand how different communication, the way in which you communicate with investors, completely changes the perception of you. I'm talking about off-the-cuff comments you make in meetings. I'm talking about the way in which you word emails. I'm talking about the way in which and how you answer questions to investors. We need to hone into what communication looks like, different scenarios and how that plays out, what preparation you can do within those so that different negative scenarios don't ever happen, because these are the things that really move the needle in a funding round. And it's these emotional plays that you don't even realize that you're doing that can be the reason why investors say no to you. And the biggest precursor to why you're always like, oh, I don't get why investors are saying no to me. Most likely it's because of the way in which you're communicating. And we need to focus on how you communicate in the right way and focus on building that. And the last thing from that point of view is what I call record and review, but actually taking in practice calls. Once you understand the position refinement system and you're refining, once you understand how you're communicating in the right way, we then actually getting some practice calls in, doing pitch simulations, getting practice calls in and honing and recording and reviewing what's working and what's not. Because that's the only way you're going to improve. That's the only way that you're going to make fundraising a machine. And it's the only way in which you're actually going to fully understand what works and what doesn't, both from a narrative point of view, but also from a network and also a process point of view. And lastly, you need to create a professional fundraising process. A successful raise requires a structured execution plan, and you need to do that if you want to put all of the above together to meet the right investors, to tell an investable narrative, to create the right FOMO momentum to push towards a term sheet. You need to make sure that you have the right process in place for your funding round to make yourself successful. Okay, so what does that look like? So I've put these into 4 different buckets. There's a lot more that goes into it from this. But the first thing from that fundraising process is we need to make sure that we've created a proper launch timeline. So you need to find out the date you're launching. So I'm launching on October the 1st. Okay, great. You're launching on October the 1st. Great. But then you need to focus on what? 3 months before. Right? Because you're saying, okay, I want to have my first meetings October the 1st. Absolutely fine. You want to say that. Great. Well, then what are you doing in September? Week by week, what are you doing in September? What do you have to do to make sure week by week in September that you're in the right position? Same for August. What do you have to do in August, week by week, day by day, that's going to give yourself the highest chance of success that your September is the best ever to get yourself to October? Exactly the same in July. What are you doing in July? And we build that out for you because you need to understand what that launch timeline looks like and work back from, this is the day I want to launch my funding round. And if I want to have the highest chance of success and meet the right investors, have the highest perception, and have done everything over that preparation phase to improve the narrative, to increase the high chance of success, to record and review, all these kind of things, these are the steps I need to take over 2 to 3 months. Okay? The second one is really creating what a fundraising blueprint is. So if you don't understand what it takes from preparation to launch to actually meeting those first investors to second, third, to moving towards a term sheet, if you don't understand what every stage looks like, it's really hard to know what that step-by-step process looks like. So what we do is we build out that fundraising blueprint for you. right? And I show you this exact steps it takes from that preparation phase all the way to a term sheet, so that you can always look back at this timeline of, okay, I know which stage I'm in. I know the next steps that I need to do. I need to focus on all of these different sections to really make myself successful. And this is the next stage. And once we have that, then you actually know what that step-by-step process is, and you can create a proper fundraising process. Now, the third one is accountability. This is such an important one. And the biggest reason for why founders fail to fundraise is you just don't do the work. And I will make a video on this in the future, but it's really hard to make sure that you keep yourself accountable in a funding round. I understand that. When it comes to the prioritization matrix, for example, it's always something that's far away, not necessarily important to right now, and then it kind of gets ahead of you. I understand that feeling. It happened to me too. But we need to make sure that you're keeping yourself accountable and doing the work that actually moves the needle, and you're not tinkering with your pitch deck for the 100th time, and you're focusing on the things that you may not want to do, focusing on the work that you keep procrastinating on, but is going to be the biggest reason for why you're successfully fundraise. Because without that accountability, you're just not going to do the work, or you don't know what work you need to do. And because of that, you're not going to meet investors. You're not going to, you do meet investors and you're never going to convert them. And we need to hone into how we focus on these things. Okay. And the last one is just avoiding common pitfalls. I show you what those common pitfalls are. So, you know, this is the things I can't do. These are the things that don't work, and making sure that every step of the way, you're not doing those things, whether it's network, whether it's narrative, whether it's communication, whether it's how you practice in the right way, or whether it's how you actually complete your process from prep to launch to completion. And look, I think of that pro fundraising process as completing the top 4 above. Without a proper fundraising process, you can't do the top 4 in the right way or in the right positioning, and everything kind of falls into place if you do number 5 correctly and complete a proper fundraising process like a professional. Okay, so look, that's the process. Understanding investor psychology, building a network, mastering conversion through an investable narrative, practicing and iterating, and executing the fundraise properly. And as you can see, it's not just about pitching or meeting investors. It's about positioning, momentum, and closing with precision. And this is exactly how we raised $7.65 million in January. It's the same system that I've helped founders I've worked with go from struggling to get investor meetings to actually closing rounds, and how we've raised over $250 million in the last few years. So look, if you want to unlock fundraising the right way, make sure you're following these steps. Drop me a comment if you want me to break down any of these sections in more detail. And if this was more helpful, hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one.